Supacell aims to be a realistic drama about people discovering their superpowers, but still sticks to overly familiar tropes that kept me from getting hooked. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Supacell, the new series on Netflix, reads, "A group of ordinary people from South London unexpectedly develop superpowers with no clear connection between them other than them all being black. As they deal with the impact on their daily lives, one man has to bring them together to protect the one he loves, all while avoiding the powerful and nefarious agents that have noticed their special abilities." All right, so I watched the first 2 episodes. There are 6 total in what I presume is intended to be the first of multiple seasons. It's really an inner city drama, I think, long before it's anything else. There is an opening stinger where superpowers are certainly in play, but the first 30 minutes of the first episode lacks any superpowers after that. Now, the end of episode 1 gives a glimpse of a future where these characters know and cut loose with their powers, but we may never get there at the current pace, both because of when that is supposed to take place and just because of the current amount of time that's passing in the first 2 episodes. So I wouldn't be surprised if this series doesn't really cut loose in the way that I would like it to. The cast is slightly focused around a man who is getting serious in his relationship with his girlfriend, but the script is also spread thin with stories of a woman whose boyfriend is cheating on her, a gang leader whose mother went missing, a drug dealer, surprise, surprise, trying to sell drugs, a man trying to make child support payments and connect with his son. So that's 4 other stories in addition to the one that I think is meant to be kind of the central character. And on top of that, there are still scenes about each of these different characters in which they have their own small supporting casts, and introductory scenes about their stories will focus briefly on their supporting cast members instead of them. So it felt to me like multiple TV shows trying to be crammed into one. The focus was just too broad for me to get invested in any character or story going on. It also uses plot points that don't actually make sense to me, and it's not that they don't literally make sense. They would never happen in this kind of scenario, but they feel like obligatory usage of established formulas. I mean, superheroes are common enough, superpower stories are common enough now that not only do we have superhero stories, we have superpower stories and movies and stuff that are about people who don't put on superhero or villain costumes, but they do gain superpowers and they're grappling with that. We've seen enough of those kinds of things that there are some formulas that are emerging. For example, in this show, when people get their powers, they can't control them at first, okay? They seem to trigger at random. They try to show their powers to people, but of course, they can't do it on command yet. Now, personally, I would at least try to reproduce the effect on my own once, at least, before being confident I had powers and was not hallucinating. I would first go to hallucination. Now, there is some of that in this story, but I think almost every person would at first assume that they are going crazy and would try to address that. Maybe they would try to figure out, okay, did this really happen? Can I make it happen again? But until I could make it happen again, I would freak out and tell my wife, I need a doctor because I think I'm hallucinating. I would not say to my friend after only one incident, dude, I think I have superpowers. Now watch me use them, and then surprise, surprise, I can't make them work. What's happening? I thought I had superpowers. I don't think most people would go there first. I think they would go, I'm losing my mind, I'm hallucinating, and trying to get that figured out. If I get superpowers tomorrow, I'm not keeping that information to myself. I'm seeing a doctor because who knows what the crap is going on with my body and how long I have to live. Who knows? This is insane. People were like that. So I feel like there was some lip service and some brief moments and scenes that were kind of giving some kind of token acknowledgement of this is crazy, but not really leaning into it like I think that they should. If my crazy experience, here's another example, if my crazy experience of superpowers makes me believe someone I love is in danger, because I have prophetic powers or something like that, I'm going to tell that person. I'm not going to keep it to myself because I'm afraid they'll get scared of the news. Once I have confirmed to myself I'm not crazy, I have superpowers, I am telling that person we need to figure this out, we need to make sure that they're safe. I'm not going to keep it to myself because I'm afraid they'll be scared. Now, of course, you might say, well, Peter, who are you to say what you would do for sure in these kinds of crazy scenarios? Of course, you're right. We can't know. But then I at least want stories that feel like, to me, like they've thought about this scenario more thoroughly, and offer much different possibilities than Supacell does so far. It just feels a little too familiar. And I'm ready. To the point where I'm getting impatient. I'm like, okay, we're doing this beat. Okay, can we move this beat along? I know how this goes. So the cast, I really have no complaints about. The cast is, I think, really good. It's probably intended for a British audience first. I mean, almost certainly I think it is. There are certainly some non-typical dialects. By non-typical, I mean non-typical in Hollywood movies, you know. And I don't live in London, so they're not typical to me. They're probably I'm sure they're very typical in London. But that's what I mean when I say non-typical dialects, that made it difficult to understand for me about 10 to 20% of the time. My family is much more quick to turn on subtitles. I tend to not like that unless they're actually speaking in a different language. So I did not do that. But the performances, I think, still carried the moments and the stories. I was feeling and going along with the arcs that I think I was supposed to. I was tracking with the arcs and what people were feeling and I think what was driving them. So even though 10 to 20% of the words felt like, I'm not sure what they said, I'm not sure what that expression means, things like that, I didn't feel lost. It was just like I did feel just a little bit at a distance more than I would like to be. As far as stunts and visuals, story about people with superpowers, that's got to be a significant component. It's definitely not top tier visuals. There are some cool moments for sure. One or two that I'm like, dude, this is really cool. But they're brief. Again, this is not a show that's really focused on that. It's first and foremost by far an inner city drama. But even so, there's enough of those brief moments that I'm disappointed when, in addition to being brief and sparse, they don't look great, There's maybe one sequence that I was like, that looks great. But the rest is like, yeah, this looks like, network television visual effects. So I think it's pretty clear they don't have the budget to make visual effects a big selling point of the story. Not as bad as like a comedy about people with superpowers where the visual effects are just going to be crap, but still not like what you would give to a show that's really selling itself on superhero action. Okay, themes. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that could trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? I think the themes are likely going to emerge later in the season, maybe even later in the series. I think a possible thread now is how power affects people of different character. People who have greater or lesser character developed are going to, respond differently to coming upon power or resources. There's a reason that Jesus says in Luke 16, one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. And so his word to those he's teaching is, why do you think you're going to be trusted with true riches if you can't be trusted in the smaller things of this world? As we gain authority or financial wealth or influence, we tend to simply do on a larger scale what we did before on a smaller scale. It's a reason we can be grateful that in most cases authority is not literally granted at random. We might feel passed over for moving up the ladder in our careers, things like that. But at the end of the day, it is not generally the case that people are in boardrooms just rolling dice, but it's based on, in some sense, on track record, on trustworthiness. So if I'm really reaching for themes based on the first two episodes, a possible takeaway from Supacell is the upward call to develop our character and virtues so that if and when our resources or power increase, we'll be ready to use them wisely rather than cause destruction to ourselves. I don't think that's an intended message, but I think that's a principle in Scripture that would be good for us to reflect on. Because power and resources tend to bring out who we already are rather than give us the life that will really make us happy. All right, no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were to go back in time, if I had that superpower, I won't say anything. I almost said something. I won't say it. Well, you can watch the show if you want. I almost spoiled something. Anyway, skip Pater. It's not completely uninteresting, but there's just too many other things you'd rather do than watch the rest of this. And there's just kind of too much normal drama and formulaic convention in it, and not enough psychological grappling with superpowers or really cutting loose with them or really doing something that feels truly original, apart from saying, hey, let's focus this kind of premise in inner city South London, you know. Anyway, this one's rated TVMA for language, nudity, and violence. No nudity that I spotted in the first 2 episodes, so maybe that's coming later on. Anyway, those are all of my thoughts for now on Supacell episodes 1 and 2. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. For info about the benefits of joining, go to patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. And then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.